Welcome to the Sealed Pages.
It is so good to be here for this one.
Yeah, it's a really special session today. We are taking a deep dive into the 10th book by Feroz Anka.
And this one is titled The Architecture of Mercy, The Hidden Geometry of Goodness.
Right. And I have to admit, when I first picked this up, I kind of braced myself for a collection of maybe sweet, saccharine platitudes about being nice.
Oh, absolutely. You hear a word like mercy, and you immediately expect this lofty, unapproachable meditation on universal love.
Exactly. But what we actually have here is a rigorously structural inquiry. It's really a metaphorical construction manual.
It completely reframes everything.
It does. It asks this core question that we are going to dissect from every angle today. How do we re-architect the concept of goodness in everyday life, not as a fleeting feeling, but as a deliberate structural discipline?
It really is a complete paradigm shift. And to understand the mind behind this geometry, I think it helps to briefly recognize the dual worlds the author inhabits.
Right, the background in physics.
Physics and computer science. He navigates these highly structured analytical realms, leading massive digital transformations. Yet, parallel to that world of rigid systems, he explores the entirely unstructured, beautifully fragile world of the human self.
He brings the cold precision of an architect to the warm, ethereal landscape of human emotion.
You feel that exact synthesis the very moment you hold this book in your hands.
You really do. And before we even open the pages, we kind of have to talk about the physical object itself because the cover is doing so much thematic work.
It sets the entire atmospheric tone. For you as a reader, if you are holding it, you notice the background right away. It is this deep, matte midnight teal.
It's a gorgeous color.
It is. It has this subtle, tactile, textured surface that is neither glossy nor flat. It gives you an immediate impression of incredible depth and quiet strength.
And sitting exactly in the center is that dominant visual element, the refined copper line art structure.
Right, a dome that, as your eyes follow the thin symmetrical lines downward, gradually transforms into the shape of a heart.
That blending of shapes is just brilliant. The dome at the top suggests stability, transcendence, something that shelters and endures the elements.
While the heart form below implies inwardness and compassion, it merges structure with feeling perfectly.
And it resembles sacred geometry or maybe the blueprint of a spiritual structure.
The copper lines are slightly raised, almost embossed, so they stand gently against that dark midnight teal background. They don't overwhelm the darkness. They simply exist within it.
The overall impression is incredibly disciplined, symmetrical, and restrained. It is not an emotional cover, it is an intentional one.
The cover does not shout. It stands.
It does not shout, it stands. That is honestly the perfect thesis for everything we're about to unpack today.
It really is.
But before we step across the threshold of this specific structure, we should briefly orient you, the listener, within the larger landscape we have been exploring in our sessions together. We have charted 9 earlier books by Anka, treating them as thematically interconnected explorations of the human condition.
A massive journey so far.
Yeah. Lines of the Void is a poetic philosophical journey through symbols, masks, time, nature, and chaos, asking whether we inhabit reality or our own maps.
Which leads perfectly into the next phase.
Right. Paths to Myself is a quiet guide from crowds and borrowed voices towards solitude's silence and inner harmony.
Establishing that internal baseline.
And What Remains Within explores prose poems on unsaid words, grief, shame, regret, fragile strength, and faith that survives in ruins.
Finding what lasts after the collapse.
Exactly. Then The Geography of Truth acts as a contemplative atlas where places, ruins, sacred lands, cities, and wounded geographies become mirrors of the human heart.
A literal mapping of the soul.
While What Remains of Humanity in Modern Times offers a fragmented reflection on the psychological, moral, and spiritual erosion of the modern age, tracing what survives of our humanity amid noise, speed, disconnection, and the quiet collapse of meaning.
That one was a heavy, deeply resonant exploration.
It was. Then, Before Sentences is a contemplative descent into pre-linguistic consciousness, seeking the truth that exists before words where silence is not absence but origin.
Taking us all the way back to the root.
And Voice Memos to Myself serves as a day-long inner recording, moving from dawn into stillness, tracing the tension between speed and direction noise and conscience.
The daily struggle of just existing in the modern world.
Followed by Reverse Conformity, which is a philosophical existential examination of an age where sameness is marketed as peace, tracing the hidden architecture of conformity and the cost of dissent.
Such a necessary critique of our times.
And finally, The Dictionary of Self-Extinguished Concepts functions as a philosophical autopsy of modern language, mapping a cemetery of exhausted words and their possible resurrection through disciplined integrity.
It is a profound, interconnected map.
Hmm.
And that brings us right to the structure we are exploring today.
Yes, Book 10. And this book takes the form of a philosophical poetic essay. The sentences are short, dense, and evocative.
It unites the clarity of a classical essay with the rhythm of a modern fragment. As you read, you realize that thought is spoken not in a sprawling, overwhelming paragraph, but in a breath.
So let's step into the opening of the book, which completely reframes everything modernity has taught us about being a good person.
It really tears down our assumptions.
We usually mistake mercy for a lofty emotion. We think of it as a warmth, a softness of the heart that spills over spontaneously. But here, Anka defines mercy as a discipline of construction.
Yeah, that completely changes the stakes.
There is this stunning line early on. A stone falls into the heart and makes no sound. Yet from that silence, domes are born.
Think about the psychological relief that reframing offers you as a sensitive listener. We live in an age that constantly bombards us with the demand to feel.
The constant pressure of performance.
Yes, you are expected to feel deep, agonizing empathy for every global tragedy that flashes across your screen, to feel profound compassion in every minor social interaction, to constantly generate this soft, overflowing emotional state.
Which is impossible to sustain.
Psychologically, it leads to immense empathy fatigue. You just burn out. But this concept lifts that impossible emotional burden off your shoulders. You don't have to constantly manufacture a soft emotion to be good. Goodness endures through what the text calls small orders.
I love that phrase, small orders. It shifts mercy from a fleeting sentiment to an architectural discipline requiring measure, balance, and design.
Because you don't build a house with a feeling. You build it with careful, repeated, disciplined actions.
It is the withdrawal of a hand at the right moment. It is the refusal to withhold a gaze when someone needs to be seen. It is the conscious leaving of a sentence unfinished.
Which means every human being is a master builder.
Yeah.
Every day, unknowingly, you are building a structure within yourself.
Some raise walls with patience, while others tear them down with reactive anger.
Exactly. You're either building a sanctuary within your heart, or you're building a ruin.
Right. So if we are going to build a sanctuary, we have to start where any architect starts. Let's dig into the first major section, the foundation.
The most crucial part.
In any physical building, the foundation is unseen. It is buried in the dirt. Yet it bears the weight of everything that rises above it. The book identifies the blueprint of this foundation as our intention. It calls it the weight of intention.
That unseen drawing.
Yes, intention is described as the unseen drawing, the first point where the pen touches the paper. If the heart is poured crooked, the stone will not straighten.
If we connect this to the reality of how we live, intention is what separates genuine goodness from the coldness of mere display. Two actions can look identical from the outside.
Completely identical.
Two people can hand a coin to a stranger or offer to help a colleague with a project. But the structural weight of the act is entirely different. One act might shine like gilding on the outside, but makes no sound as it falls into the universe.
It is hollow.
Right, it is hollow because the intention was purely to be perceived as helpful. The other act might be heavy, silent, unseen by anyone, yet it holds the world in balance. If you are doing good merely to build your own ego, you aren't building a sanctuary of mercy. You are raising a wall of display.
And as any builder knows, if you corrupt the foundation, even a flawless dome will eventually sound hollow and crack. But the foundation of mercy isn't just an internal abstract thought. It instantly translates into how we physically orient ourselves to the world.
Which is where it gets incredibly practical.
Yes, the chapter moves to the ethics of eye level.
This is one of the most emotionally resonant concepts in the entire journey. Goodness begins with the physical and spiritual discipline of standing at another person's eye level.
Not above or below.
Exactly. If you look at someone from above, looking down on them with pity or superiority, you forget mercy. If you look at them from below, looking up with subservience or idolization, you learn humiliation.
Equal distance is the very first measure of mercy.
Think about what it feels like when you physically bend down to the eye level of a child who is upset. You aren't just adjusting your physical height. You are approaching their world. You are creating a silent alignment that neither commands nor begs.
It is a form of structural justice, and that ties directly into what the text calls the mercy of seeing and the responsibility of the gaze.
A huge issue in our current landscape.
The modern age has made watching incredibly easy. We watch millions of lives on screens. We scroll past faces endlessly. but we have forgotten how to notice. The distinction drawn here between merely looking and truly witnessing someone's existence is profound.
Because seeing is not just a biological sense in this framework. It is an act of witnessing. When you truly see someone, you offer them visible existence.
Loneliness is woven from the absence of the gaze.
That is exactly it. What keeps a human alive is the feeling of being seen. Not being praised, not being approved of, but simply receiving a gaze that says you are. Sometimes the most profound architectural stone you can lay in a relationship is simply looking at someone, giving them your full undivided attention, and conveying the silent sentence, "I see you."
But I want to explore the friction in that for a second, because the book is very careful to remind us that the gaze carries weight. Every gaze is a contact, and every contact leaves a trace.
Being stared at too intensely can feel invasive.
Right, which leads us to the structural concept of spacing. In masonry, stones cannot be mashed together indiscriminately without mortar, or they grind each other to dust. There must be space.
The morality of distance.
Yes, the architect of goodness knows the exact interval of where to stand.
Distance is the measure of the heart. We so often assume in our culture that closeness is always the ultimate goal of love or goodness. We think we need to merge completely with the people we care about.
But closeness heals only when it is balanced. Excess suffocates.
When I read this, it really made me think of that friend who texts you 6 times in a row before you have even had a chance to type a reply. They might mean well, they might just want connection, but there is a structural failure there. They are collapsing the space.
They are grinding the stones together.
Exactly. If you draw too near to someone, you stop seeing them and only see your own reflection, your own needs in them. If you withdraw too far, you forget their face entirely. Boundaries are what preserve sincerity.
There is a real architecture to giving people space. To leave space for someone to respect their boundary without alienating them is framed as a profound form of mercy. It is the subtle tension between approaching and remaining in place.
And the book explores this beautifully through the subtlety of touch.
Touch doesn't just probe the skin, it probes the soul. It is a wordless language. But touch, too, has its measure. To reach out a hand and to know exactly when to withdraw it, that is true refinement.
And before that touch even happens, before any action is born, it draws a breath. This is what Anka calls silence before action.
A vital pause.
It raises such an important question for you, the listener.
Yeah.
How often do you act out of pure, unthinking reaction? In a world that demands instant responses, instant replies to emails, instant hot takes on the news, instant defense when criticized, taking a pause, a moment of silent preparation, purifies your action from the noise of the world.
Silence is the first measure of architecture.
I think we all struggle with that. If your mind is crowded with thoughts of, do they deserve my help? Or how will this make me look? Your foundation is clouded. But if you fall silent, the heart simply asks, do they need it?
That brief, sharp moment of silence settles the noise, and the true essence of your intention remains.
So we have laid this beautiful silent foundation. We have the unseen intention, the equal gaze, the respectful distance, the silent pause. But let's be real, foundations are tested. What happens when the heavy, stressful realities of life start pressing down on this structure?
That is exactly where the book takes us next. We move from the unseen dirt into the vertical reality of Section 2, load bearers.
The virtues that carry weight.
They are the structural columns that keep the architecture of mercy from cracking under the immense pressures of human existence. The text identifies these structural supports as patience, justice, dignity, and balance.
Let's look closely at the silent state of justice.
We usually think of justice as a loud, triumphant verdict. We picture gavels, banging crowds, cheering someone getting publicly taken down. But the argument here is that justice does not shout. It is a scale without noise. It senses balance and restores it.
If truth falls heavy upon his pan, the scale does not tremble.
To be right is easy, but to be just is incredibly difficult. Being right often enlarges your own ego. You want to rub it in someone's face. Being just requires you to see the whole structure, to restore balance without adding unnecessary humiliation to the other side.
And the ultimate stress test for this load-bearing column is justice in the face of the enemy. This is the concept of remaining just toward someone you actively do not love. The book describes this as the heaviest trial of mercy, a quiet revolution of the heart.
How you defeat your enemy shows who you are constructing yourself to be.
This resonates so deeply with the psychological reality of conflict. When you are wronged, the immediate human instinct is to strip the other person of their humanity, to crush them completely, to make them hurt as much as they hurt you.
But the architect knows that a wall carries both the inside and the outside.
You can draw a firm boundary. You can defend yourself vigorously without destroying the humanity of the other person. To preserve your dignity, even when wronged, to refrain from poisoning yourself with hatred that is preserving your inner architecture.
But that sounds almost impossibly saintly. If someone betrays you, holding up that column of justice without letting it turn into a weapon feels like it requires superhuman strength. How do we actually bear this weight without breaking?
The text addresses exactly that in a concept called grace beneath the weight. Grace isn't about being untouchable or floating above the fray pretending you aren't hurt. The nobility of strength lies in softening despite the pain.
Yielding like a branch in the wind.
Bending so you don't snap, but never forgetting your root. True goodness is the architecture that allows the storm to pass through it while preserving its calm. Evil is noisy and flashes in an instant. Goodness is quiet, moves slowly, and spreads its light across years.
Resistance isn't about shouting. It is about protecting yourself without hardening into stone. It is being harmed without becoming poison.
Softening despite the pain. The book honors this profound endurance in a beautiful passage called The Song of the Bearers. These are the silent, indispensable people who carry the weight of the world.
Think of the people in your life who embody this. A mother's quiet patience when she is completely exhausted but still answers her child's questions. A worker's daily uncomplaining sweat. The elder who speaks words that intentionally wound no one.
They carry the spine of the world without trembling, and they expect absolutely no applause. Their song is slow, sung with endurance. Even if the outer world collapses, the balance they leave behind remains intact.
So we have these massive columns holding everything up. But a building cannot just be solid rock. If you make a structure entirely out of dense, impenetrable material, it becomes a tomb.
It has no life inside.
Which brings us to what I think is the most counterintuitive and brilliant concept in the entire book. Voids. The power of absence.
The architecture of negative space.
In physical architecture, if you pack stones too tightly, the wall cannot breathe, and under thermal expansion it will crack. The gap between the stones is what allows the structure to stand. In human ethics, this architectural negative space translates to enunciation, postponement, and silence.
This is a profound shift for the modern mind, which is utterly obsessed with filling every single void. We want to fill every silence with words, every empty hour with productivity, every blank space with an object.
We are terrified of the empty space.
But we are introduced here to the wholeness of reduction and the wisdom of imperfection. A master builder intentionally leaves a window allowance, a slight deviation, a tiny imperfection in the wall.
Why? So that light can enter.
Perfection is rigid, it enlarges pride, and eventually cracks under pressure. Imperfection cultivates humility.
Let's ground this in daily life. How does this void manifest in our relationships? The author uses the phrase swallowing a sentence.
Imagine you are in an argument with your partner or a colleague. You have the perfect cutting remark, loaded and ready. You know it will win the argument. You know you are right, but you consciously choose to swallow the sentence.
The modern world might call that a defeat.
The prevailing cultural advice is to speak your truth, to never hold anything back. But this framework sees it as a structural decision. Not every thought must be spoken. Truth spoken too early or spoken purely to wound turns into a wrong.
Swallowing that sentence is an ethical choice that creates a void, a breathing space that preserves the relationship.
It lowers the pulse. It leaves room for repair.
I can hear the counter-argument forming for some listeners, though. Isn't swallowing a sentence just suppressing your feelings? My therapist might say I need to express my anger, or else it just builds up as resentment in a different structural column. How does the text reconcile that?
That is exactly where the nuance of intention comes back into play. Suppression is swallowing a sentence out of fear or out of a feeling of powerlessness and letting it rot inside you. What the book describes is the mercy of restraint.
A conscious choice.
It is a powerful choice to withhold a strike because you value the integrity of the whole structure more than the momentary triumph of your own ego. It is not fear, it is mastery.
That makes total sense. It is the honor of letting go. The text also speaks of the mercy of delay. We worship speed, but delaying a reaction or letting go of a battle that isn't meant to be won creates immense psychological breathing space.
Letting go isn't a loss. It is removing the scaffolding once the building can stand on its own.
And executing this requires such immense sensitive strength. The book calls it passing without breaking.
Think of life as a narrow corridor, and the walls are lined with fragile hearts. True power is not about how much impact you make as you walk down that hall.
True power is walking through that corridor, sliding a chair back, silently lowering your voice, stepping aside in a narrow passage, and touching the world without leaving a scar. It is the profound discipline of feeling.
It is stunning to think of omission, what we actively choose not to do, as the very thing that gives our character its shape.
But a building isn't just foundation columns and negative space. A dark, empty structure isn't a sanctuary. It must be illuminated. And so the blueprint takes us to the next phase: light. Visible mercy.
What's fascinating here is the sequencing. Notice that light only appears after the stability and the voids are established.
It can't be rushed.
Light symbolizes the outward manifestation of all this inward structure. It is how mercy finally becomes visible to the world. And the very first beam of light discussed is the architecture of forgiveness.
Let's unpack that, because forgiveness is a heavy, complicated word. People often mistake it for sort of passive amnesia. But the text makes a crucial distinction. Forgiving is not forgetting.
Forgetting is simply erasing the record. Forgiving is rebuilding from what has fallen.
If you think about it structurally, if a wall collapses and you just leave the rubble as it is, you have a ruin. If you pretend the wall never fell, you are living in a delusion.
But if you take those same fallen stones and rebuild the wall with a new supporting system, new mortar, that is wisdom, forgiveness is that second construction.
It is looking clearly at the damage, redistributing the load, and replacing the anchor of anger with calm. It is an architectural decision to say, I will no longer carry the weight of this resentment. It opens a small window in the wall so that air and light can finally enter again.
And that light shines outward in other ways, too, through what is called the ethics of compliment. A true compliment in this geometry is not about exalting the person giving it. It is not about displaying your own elegance or your great taste.
It makes the other person visible. It is the art of noticing another human being.
It is holding up a mirror to them. A genuine compliment speaks at ear level. It notices the specific, quiet effort of another person and says, you are here too, and your effort is seen.
It creates no debt. It doesn't demand a compliment in return. It is just a brief journey of light from one human to another.
This whole section has such a warmth to it. It explores the magic of small kindnesses and the architecture of a smile.
A smile is described as a wordless accord. It is a small curve on the face that acts exactly like a structural arch. In masonry, an arch is designed to distribute the heavy, crushing downward load of a ceiling.
A smile does the same thing. It lightens the heavy, invisible weight of the world for someone else, even if just for a second.
And consider the geometry of loving without casting a shadow. To love someone without owning them.
If you stand too close to someone, constantly in their light hovering over them, you end up losing yourself in your own shadow and you eclipse them.
Yeah.
If you stand too far, you leave them cold.
Grace is finding that exact, precise interval where you can warm them without burning them and stand near them without blocking their light.
The book brings all of this visible light into a beautiful concluding image for this section in the story of Shining Hands. It argues that hands carry more healing than words.
The hands of a mother, a healer, a master builder, they extend, they lighten a load, and then, crucially, they withdraw in silence.
They do their work, and they leave no trace of ego, only the firmness of the repair.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the final architectural layer. You have the foundation, the collars, the windows, the light. Now you need the covering.
The roof. Completion and humility.
The roof is what covers the entire structure, what protects it from the elements. And we learn here that the whole of this internal architecture is held together by humility.
Humility is the capstone. It is the understanding that the beauty of the structure is just the silent standing of each part in its rightful place. When the part falls silent, the whole speaks.
The higher you rise in this architecture, the more goodness you cultivate, the more you must incline and bow. The roof doesn't boast about being at the top, it simply shields what is below.
This section explores a concept I think a lot of high achievers will relate to: the courage to finish.
We live in an economic and social world that always demands more. More growth, more optimization, more output.
But the master builder knows when to step back, put the tools down, and say, it is enough. Recognizing the moment of completion is framed as the most mature form of proportion.
But arriving there is not without a profound cost. The book speaks very honestly, almost intimately to the reader about weary mercy.
If you actually live this way, feeling deeply, bearing weight for others, holding boundaries, swallowing sentences, offering light, you will grow incredibly weary.
But the crucial insight is that weariness is not a weakness. It is not a sign that your structure is failing. It is the sacred cost of remaining human.
It proves that you can still feel. When the heart is tired from carrying goodness, it simplifies. And in that simplicity, it becomes more real.
And part of how that weariness is healed is through silent acceptance. Now, when people hear acceptance, they often mistake it for surrender or defeat.
But it is not defeat. It is the mature structural awareness that some stones simply do not move. There are situations, people, tragedies in life that you cannot fix.
If you force them, if you keep hammering away at a stone that won't budge you, distort and damage the entire structure of your own life.
Silent acceptance is saying this too exists, and leaving no anger, no bitter expectation in that sentence. It is the ability to look at a fault line without demanding it change, to carry an imperfection gracefully.
Your resistance becomes stillness. And when you reach that stillness, you arrive at what might be the most transcendent moment in the text, resting beneath the light.
It is the beautiful, inevitable transition from doing to being.
After a lifetime of loving, of giving, of forgiving and sharing, there is eventually nothing left to construct. The hammer falls silent.
You learn simply to sit beneath the light you have allowed in. You desire no more. You are no longer carrying yourself, your ego, your need to be seen as good. You are simply carrying the light.
Mercy is no longer an action you have to consciously perform. It is a state in which you exist.
This is a profound completion. As the book closes, the author offers a dedication to the silent architects of goodness.
These are the nameless individuals. Perhaps you know one. Perhaps you are one whose daily habits of restraint, of swallowed sentences and equal gazes keep humanity standing.
They don't seek applause, they don't go viral, they simply maintain the load-bearing columns of time.
And as we reflect on this entire blueprint, it is worth noticing the subtle, beautiful undercurrent of the author's true intention. Without ever overwhelming the reader with religious dogma or heavy-handed theology, Feroz Anka has gently translated divine consciousness into the surface of ordinary stones.
The Islamic concepts of Al-Rahman, which is the eternal foundational fountain of mercy, and Al-Rahim, the specific act of mercy that touches everyday life, are woven into every act of restraint, every equal gaze, every swallowed sentence we have discussed.
It is a quiet invitation to infuse your daily work and speech with the awareness of the divine, seeing human goodness as a reflection of that ultimate source. It gives the architecture a sense of the sacred without demanding you adhere to a specific creed to understand the geometry.
So who is this blueprint actually for? I would offer a gentle invitation to you, the listener. This book is for those who seek to live intentionally. It is for those who are exhausted by the relentless noise, the speed, and the performative empathy of our age.
If you value contemplative literature, I highly suggest a slow, meditative reading of this text. Don't rush through it to extract life hacks. Read a passage and then sit with the silence it leaves behind.
Notice how over time, your own inner map and your internal architecture begin to shift quietly. You will start to notice the weight of your intentions, the spaces you leave in conversations, and the light you allow to enter.
We have spent this session walking through the blueprint. We have talked about foundations, load-bearing columns, the wisdom of voids, and the roof of humility. But here is something new to mull over as you step back into the noise of your day. We live in a digital age where algorithms are quite literally designed to tear down our patience, collapse our distance, and profit off our outrage.
They want us reactive, loud, and constantly swinging the hammer.
In a landscape like that, is building this silent, disciplined architecture of goodness still just a matter of personal peace, or has it become the ultimate radical act of modern rebellion? As you consider what it means to build a sanctuary in an age of ruins, ask yourself this. If mercy is not constructed within, can it truly stand under pressure?